All right. We will make an interactive scraper-based API like what I've been working on with mock BirdSite. I implemented messages functionality today, and I'll just look at that real quick. So in the worker client, we get payloads with the command and params, I think. Yeah. So oh yeah, sorry, payload.taskID is right. So this is the one that worked earlier today, and I did not go into messages for a conversation yet. So handle paginated chat conversations at the URL i/chat. And then in handle DM requests, I made a new file for that. Handle paginated chat conversations. So it doesn't do the pagination part yet. I had Grok write that for me for tweets, and then I partially copied it over to users, and now I'm starting DMs. So I'm doing kind of breadth search, just getting a little bit of everything working to find just how each part looks, so I can mentally process it in the background or whatever, sleep on it. So this is just a very basic skeleton implementation to get the list of conversations. So first we create the tab, and then we wait 15 seconds until we can get some more conservative loading code, or I should say some more optimized. This is just a conservative, since it's got to do that whole connecting thing where it's probably doing some crypto stuff. It takes a while to actually log in and connect. So give it 15 seconds, and then we want to execute script in a target of that tab ID. And we want to inject the files scrapedms.js. And then we await that. So that'll be done and loaded by the time we move on to, again, result equals await, because we're in an async function. That's the same as returning a promise and waiting until it's resolved. It's just a language level way to write that. So then result is the resolved promise value of executing this script function parse DM conversation list. One thing to know about that is it turns this function code into a string and then sends it over, and then basically evals that string into a function over there. So it's a dynamic scope, so whatever function names or whatever variables you refer to in the function will be in the scope of inside the tab, if that makes sense to you. So the way I have it set up is to include the same function through here. I do it by injecting it because I cannot do import scripts there, but one of my higher level scripts, probably background.js, imports that script. So I have the same function in both spots. So it still sort of needlessly converts the function to a string, sends it over and does that, but the other side has the same function and the same everything else that the function depends on, more importantly. Right, so we call it, we await the result to come back. There's a little bit of destructuring to do. It gives us an array with a result object. There might be an error to check, but it hasn't been an issue so far. And yeah, anyway. So then we resolve this async function with data as the visible convos. So this is not the exact V2 API response format, I found out, but it's easily workable into that format, which is actually just a list of DM events with message create and participant join and similar. So that'll be an easy fix. We have the structure in place, so it'll be a matter of then updating this function. And so we'll go to scrapedms.js next. So we have the code to extract the messages. We just need to wire it up in the same way that we're doing it for the conversation list right now, or what would be the /DM_events endpoint. So right now we're just calling parse DM conversation list on our list of HTML list items. And if we don't provide that, then the default is this, and I believe that's the case we use. So by looking at the HTML structure in the inspector of the DevTools, we can, obviously spam bots in there. So part of the motivation might be to make a tool that monitors your conversations and filters out likely spam bot conversations, right? So you parse the DM conversation lists, and then you extract all the relevant details like the avatar image, URL, profile link, etc. You can see the verified and protected status. And then we simulate the user object as well, which will come back in the includes portion of the conversation. So includes users, so that matches the API structure that we would get back from the official server. And then we additionally have this unread count variable. So this unread count thing is just something that I wanted to do inline to make tool development, a little bit more streamlined, because the thing that I originally used this for was to be the backing logic for a DM badge indicator. So if you receive a DM right now, you don't always get a indicator on the side of your screen. So, whoops. So when you get a chat message, it doesn't always put the blue indicator here. And so what this does is use that code, and if you have unread messages visible at the top of the list, then it will put that indicator onto the screen. And I've shared the code to that before, which includes this this DM parsing code in that as well, because that's what it uses. And then it's a very simple logic where you keep this code, you run it by pasting it into a developer console, and then, sorry for the bump and the drink without muting, I know better. It can then just call that function, and if unread count is greater than 0, then I made it so it checks the title to see if the first character is a star, and if it's not, and unread count is greater than 0, then it makes it start with a star. And if count is 0 and it does start with a star, then it takes away the first two characters, which is a star and a space. And yeah, the logic to put an actual counter in there, like that inbox you see on the bottom center of my screen, would just be a little bit more difficult. And so I just made it so it just puts a star, plain and simple. If there's like 2 messages you're always ignoring or something, then you can change the code to be greater than 2 instead of 0, for example. You know, primitive, but that's how the early phases of things start. So dailydriverapps.com is my website. I'm gonna just do like a little, you know, plug of my stuff. So customs, this is basically you write me a prompt and then you tell me how to get a hold of you. What is an app? So an app starts out, this is just a vibe written, you know, like old school vibe coding, but with English language. One take, no fake, blah, blah, blah. So it just starts with like a daily text file, a daily way you start doing stuff. And then, you know, it turns into a little script with a bunch of hard-coded stuff that you can just use every day or whatever. And then you need to share it. And then you might need 2 people working on it at once. And then, you know, it does this and this. Can it also do that? You know, now you need a developer, maybe an engineer. You know, what's the cost of failure? Blah, blah, blah. Plug my stuff, type it, request it. Okay. So scrape DMs, you parse the list, and it gives you back this sort of mock structure that's more of a materialized view of your conversation list. I could just as easily ask it to give me back the DM events format, but it seems to have hallucinated this format similar to the earlier versions API. I tried looking for this as like an artifact, but I didn't look too hard. So it just kind of hallucinated this materialized view of a conversation rather than the DM events. And I remember looking just a little bit at that logic in Hogumadi. I just barely started getting to implementing DMs in the premium extensions, which is another one of my offers. It's a $12 a month subscription to early access. So extensions premium is one location where I have them. That's where they're running from. I don't know that it's the source location. I'm still just unpacking all of this. It's been a couple years, and mock BirdSite is it's evolved over like the course of a month of evolving demos with like scraper based technology. until finally it culminated in like doing a work queue based demo, doing an OAuth based login demo, doing like a simple bearer token auth based Twitter API endpoint clone demo, and stitching all of these things together by hand as a human. So this is like using the AI as a junior developer on chat who can instantly give me whatever little piece that I ask it for. So it's not really thinking for me so much as just saving me hiring somebody for 2 or 3 days who's this capable. So, you know, potentially into the thousands of dollars just by having this little simple prompt, and like a 6 or 8 gig GPU card running locally can run about the same size model. Talking about the Enoch model from the Brighteon team, so that's pretty cool. You have to tell it a lot more. You have to load its context up a lot more than Grok. Grok just knows a lot of stuff. But, you know, I still kind of pass it in hints about HTML and JSON formats and stuff where I need to. And since I'm making scrapers for things that offer API documentation, I just have the scraper go into that format so that I can then just code against it as though I have actual API access, but then I just change the API server to my localhost port 5900 instead of api.x.com. And then when I have the cash flow to buy an API license, then I can just change it back over to the official servers. So that's the goal in doing it this exact way for this exact service. You might have your own reasons, whatever, but, you know, just kind of picturing what are you trying to do, but extract data from a website without, you know, setting up API access or whatever. Or maybe they just don't have it, in which case you can invent it based on a similar service, like so like Hogumadi has its own core. Sorry if my speaking goes a little fast. I get a little excited. But the core API has its own data model. I'm trying to remember, just under Hogumadi_app, view model. So we have our own feed item class, and it's a data class just because it gives us strong typing. So if we were using something like an IDE that could autocomplete and syntax check, we get that added benefit for very little extra decoration of the types, I feel. So it's a good trade-off. You annotate things like optional, and it uses the generics, and you can do it recursively as well. You might see some of these in a string. So a feed item might have replied to feed items. I really should change these to like replied item, but I'm just, you know, started with one service and mirrored it out to others. So this is tangential to scraping. This is actually a client that would use the official API. So like the benefit is just strongly typed libraries. So I made one for the Twitter API for this project as well. This is online right now, my github.com/harlanji/Hogumadi. So the API is typed. So DM message create type, participant join type, events response. So each of these is a DM event. The data is I'm not sure why I didn't make that DM event general, but it's a union of one of these 3 types within that list. So if you know Scala, this should look pretty familiar. If you know Python, this is the built-in typing stuff. So if you're going past like Python 3.9 or 10 or so, this should look maybe a little bit familiar. You should be familiar with this if you're going there. So yeah, I've just got types for the whole official API, or the vast majority of it, including some imagined ones where there's video media and GIF media. You know, I kept it as true to the official as possible, to the point where the reason for that is there's a function to directly deserialize from JSON to these data classes, and that's called DACITE, D-A-C-I-T-E. And so I use that to take the API response, and first thing, I translate it into the strongly typed response. And I think I have a Boolean to disable that if you just directly want the dicts and the dict objects and the list objects, and you know, just deserialized from JSON to native types back. It would just be if you want to use the dot notation accessors and have strong typing in whatever tools you're using. So I give that option here. And then within Hogumadi itself, we have a second abstraction that goes over it. So user, we should have a tweet somewhere. These are in order of the leaves of the tree would have to come before the next level up, because we don't have the forward declaration of stuff. So because tweet depends on almost everything else, it's going to have to be towards the bottom, if that makes sense. So that already has to be defined by the time we get to it. Some types of things like functions, those can be defined in any order because parsers do a 2-pass thing where first they go and they find all the top level things like functions, and then after that they go through and go into the code of everything else and use those functions. So things can be defined out of order. A little bit of a tangent, but hey, you're here, we're talking about this kind of stuff. Yeah, and I am doing this live, but it's really recorded greenfield. I mean evergreen, so that it's good to listen to at any point in the future. So back to mock BirdSite. And so there are 2 parts to it. We've been looking at the browser extension so far. So how does the custom Twitter app that we have So this is gonna load our timeline. There's a long 15-second delay built in. Pretty much what I'd want to do is look down for like where the spinner is, and once that's no longer there, then start scrolling, as opposed to keep on waiting for the additional time that gives us 15 seconds. Okay, so here's our timeline that's scraped off of that page. And up above, for each feed item, there's a time on it, created time, and the type of tweet that it is. So if it's purple, then it's probably like a retweet or maybe a quote tweet or a reply perhaps. But anyway, so then if we scroll to the end, then this API will get another request. Scroll down. And then we get the additional tweets to scroll down. So we looked at, once we actually get the payload with the command and the parameters within handle DM requests, and then back out to, I think, worker client.js. So yeah, we get the list of convos. But what happens before that? So how do we get to this payload.command switch? So we have an event source that connects to our server, that same localhost 5900, and then it's /work. It just generates a client ID that's random each time it starts up. And then it logs out the ID that it's connected as. It imports the JS from background.js. And then on that event source, we say on message. It's using SSE, server sent events, as opposed to WebSockets. I just find it's a little bit simpler. It's one long response that keeps on appending data to it. So each line basically has a set format, and it might have a event type and body or not, in which case it would look like this. And then it comes as a string, and so we want to parse the data portion into JSON. We put in our log that we received a task, so we output that. And then depending on what the command is, if it's search, do one thing. If it's bookmarks, do another thing. So these would all line up to what the API calls are as far as the API client goes. So we might have get tweets API v2 doc. And by the way, we can chat if you want to. Let me just open that up. You can go to the same one we've been going to, web.libera.chat/iSpooge daily. Start. All right, so if you have IRC or you want to go to that link in the description, you don't have to register or anything. You just type whatever username you want to type. All right, so it's like 8:40. I'm just thinking about how much longer do I want to stay, keep working. Feeling pretty good. and I put this Red Bull in my drawer on 12/28. And I don't know if I've had a Red Bull since then. We're going with it. All right. It's actually very little caffeine. It's more on the taurine side. I should probably not say product names, My bad. Taurine-based energy drink with some caffeine. So yeah, you see the timeline items going on here. So we could actually look into, it's been a while since I've looked at this stuff. So I'm kind of doing archaeology on my own stuff for the last couple days. But I believe there is a list of feed items or something. So that's probably a mistake where I accidentally use a global variable instead of a local without using like var. So that's something you can do in JavaScript without if you're not careful. So yeah, that's an error. But what would we call it? Maybe I just call it tweets. I've got a function called tweet by ID. So I must have, so you automatically get objects for your HTML ID values as well. So I must have a value ID equals tweets. So unfortunate, being that it's a service specific name, but this is one of my first really big apps, my first modular app where I've got this whole plugin based system. Did like the whole multi-account login stuff. Like this is my probably first big Flask app, I should say. My first super detailed Flask app. So anyway, good to have it back online. So by the way, you could do this for like if you have an old XMPP client you want. Now, using this Twitter scraper, you could make Twitter DM parser to XMPP conversation component or something. If you can set up XMPP-based chat to go to any old endpoint, a component endpoint, you maybe have it service discovery, service chat. I don't know. It's been a really long time since I've done XMPP as well. But yeah, you could, for example, now make a Twitter DM to XMPP component-based thing. So say you've got like a nice XMPP-based chat client, for example. Now you could use that for Twitter DMs. I mean, it's like super niche, super edge case or whatever, but to 25 people in the world, it could be extremely valuable. So yeah, hey, someone came into the chat, what's going on? All right. So I'm not going to show the chat on the screen, but yeah, if you're here, you're here. What's up? All right. So So we get that payload from the SSE channel, and so let's see what's on the other end of that channel. So the server has two parts. It's got the API server part. That is where that SSE server is. So I've got it broken into a bunch of different parts so we can go kind of outside in. Let's see. So that other version of outside in, so the closest to what we were just at, which is actually the SSE channel, or as we call it, the event stream here. I don't really call it that. I had, again, Grok write me code to do this portion, and I've written almost this exact same code for an SSE event stream out of Flask, so I just went with it. I've seen the code before. I recognize this generator exit stuff. If I went to somewhere else in this code base, in the Hogumathi code base, I have almost this exact same code that I wrote, and it's pretty similar to something that I found online. So I mean, looks good to me. Use it. It's perhaps not, it works. Like, this queue is only ever used once, but it's using so it's already in a lock, and so does it need any locking properties of the queue, basically? So it might be extraneous. I think I can just put the response there, but it wrote it in terms of a queue, and so I'm just leaving it. It's working, all right. But that means basically getting test cases and stuff set up so that we can change it to be more simple. We test it and then we change it, or we just fly by the seat of our pants and change it. It's all cool. And that would just be called manual testing, and it would just be something the programmer does before they commit it. But once there's a record of it being there, then you almost have to explain taking it away. You know what I mean? So sometimes when you make a release, you don't actually release the version history. So internally you feel more free to write whatever you want, and then when you make a release, you just drop a zip file or something like that doesn't have the version history. You might use the whole commit history to write your change log, so a list of all the logical changes, but then you strip away whatever you don't want to be published, basically. So if you do dumb stuff like use AI for a few releases, it's not perfect internally, but then before you ship it, you erase that. It's sort of like, now that I'm looking at it, I'm talking about it, I should just take it out, right? But we'll see what happens at the end of the presentation. So yeah, anyway, so we have the get version, and then that actually responds stream with context and event stream client ID. So client ID, we get it from the request, so we pass it in, and then we start the event stream with that client ID. We give it back a couple headers that say keep alive and no cache, and the type is event stream. And then what happens then is this is a generator function. So that's what this yield thing is. You almost think of it as you keep on returning. Every time the function is called, you can yield a value. So you yield once that says you've connected, and then you go into a loop that goes forever, and then you keep on yielding the data of whatever you're getting then from this work broadcast. I think it's a queue. Yes, work broadcast queue. So you wait for 30 seconds. And yeah, so I get into, yeah, the code's not perfect yet, so it works, and sometimes I have to restart it. But, you know, in general, this is a working structure. So we're almost to the part where we're actually mirroring the API for the API client to connect to. So then we go back to this API v2 browser proxy. So from here you should recognize what we were receiving on the other end. So for bookmarks, this is mounted on /2. So when you see /bookmarks here, the client is actually calling /2/bookmarks. And I think I can just show you that real quick. MB API server. So we mount that. API BP is imported from there. So we mount that as /2. And then /bookmarks. And then we populate our params as values that we get from the HTTP request. So this is just a typical very thin mapping layer. And then we call it to create task response. So in the work, I've got something called the work queue. And excuse me, drinking this Red Bull, it's a little fizzy. I mean, sorry, this taurine-based energy drink. That it doesn't have a ton of sugar. You know, it's not bad occasionally. So I've got the work queue, which has the event stream. I'm already looking at it. All right, my bad. So we can get the event stream. We can post a value back. And let's see. There we are, create task. And so that's just, we're actually calling create task response. So that's a little HTTP based wrapper that takes the same parameters, command and params, and then we create a result, and we return the JSONified version of that result. And if there's an exception, then we that actually gives me an error every time it happens because there's not e.message. I don't recall the error stringification or whatever for this this object at the very moment. So anyway, so then create task is where the meat of this is. So that's a more general non-HTTP bound function. So like one endpoint could create several tasks, for example. And so we can do it without actually wrapping it as an HTTP response. So we give it an ID that's a universally unique identifier. There's other versions of this we might use. I like the I forget which one it is, but it's a time ordered version. and it looks pretty similar to one of the UUIDs. It might come to mind later, but anyway, this works. This is fine. This is generated code, but it's simple. It worked. All right, so with task lock, put this task into a map by its new generated ID with the spot to put its response and the client SSE queues, whatever that's used for. Then we create an object to broadcast out with the ID command params. So this is now getting to what we receive on the browser side, and then we work broadcast put. And then from there, it comes into this event stream thing, work broadcast.get. Okay, so what happens if we time out here also, 30 seconds, we yield a heartbeat. So that's an interesting, sorry to jump around a little bit, but yeah, I just noticed what's happening there. So the heartbeat goes basically every 30 seconds that we are not getting any activity. And it's because of the exception being used as a control structure. So that's a very, it works. But if you've got some kind of monitoring or something, because you can actually even catch caught exceptions through your tooling. So if you're like a state government that runs like audited everything, you might be creating a big log of caught exceptions, and that just doesn't look good to somebody. As petty as that sounds, you're some manager in some government department, and you see on your exception report that you've got millions of uncaught q.empty exceptions. God forbid you have a printout. 86,400 seconds in a day, so you can figure out about how many per day that's going to be, assuming you've got like whatever percent of time idle. That's not going to look good, and it's stupid, but you just don't want to be doing stuff like that. So you actually want to write some code to properly just set, blah, 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 blah. Sorry. I know, like, of those 24 people, 2 or so will find that's interesting, I maybe laugh a little bit. Yeah, so all of the API endpoint functions then just call create task response, except for a few of the old ones that I copied the pattern from that I just needed to port over. So just get whatever variables off of the request, make our task request, get the response, and return it. Tie all the pieces together right there. And then I've just got some OAuth stuff. So instead of there being, I think I can show you right now, because you can have multiple Twitter accounts logged in as well. But I only have one coded into the database. So instead of going to Twitter's login page, we go to my OAuth page. And I don't know OAuth too well, and it's a really hard to navigate thing just to find the right specs to read. So I just asked Grok to write me one that would be compatible with the Twitter API v2 client, and it did. It gave me the right, I told it it came back with like code and state. I give it the details that I could come up with, and just hope that it does the right thing, plug it in, see if it works, right? All right, see you, man, who took off. I missed you in the chat. But yeah, on the evergreen, I hope nobody takes it personal on the evergreens. I'm just, I might say hi, probably won't say to who, just what's up, chat. Hope that's not too offensive. So then you can either authorize or deny. I'm already logged in. If I authorize it, I think it's going to initiate like another profile fetch and everything. So I'm just going to skip that. I should still be logged in. Yep. So it looks similar to this. This is coming out of a tweet archive. So I thought about today too, something else I could do is make a now tweet archive based Twitter endpoint. So exactly once I have this Oracle endpoint, so we've already got the official API as an Oracle. We already know like all the clients and stuff work against that. So now if the clients work against this too, it says it's compatible, So there's like an Oracle that says, yes, this definitely works. But so you can imagine what I'm about to say is just like we have, the Twitter Live, we've got facades for the live because you see the URL is /Twitter. And right now I'm on /Twitter archive. So each one is mounted to its own spot. But it's got, pretty similar mappings of like /profile /user ID. The archive, I didn't get that far in implementing it, so it's just coded as 0. Username is always that. Display name is always this. But it does, I think, take out the time because the tweet object has one of those. It has the text. It has the number of likes, which is basically always 0. Then we've got RSS feeds as well up, and you see on the top it's got every feed has, as you scroll it, it adds the items to the timeline. So this is all, presumably last time I was working on this, which was just prior to 2023. 2022 is when I relaunched iSpooge.com, if I recall correctly. So about here, because I remember it was like 2/22/22, and I launched Mastodon hosting on that day as well. So I think this I started development around like October. And it was specifically to add this chart onto the top. And, just, not like necessarily this visual on the top, but I just wanted to have it on the profile page. And then, the profile page ended up being the same as a timeline. So just everything that's a timeline ended up getting this, if that makes sense. I say if that makes sense as though it's not going to make sense to some people sometimes. Sorry. I hear myself. Crazy guy in the basement. I think this is while I was developing Hogumadi itself, 2022, 12/18. Oh yeah, obviously it's on the timeline. Yeah, and that's what I'm talking about. So yeah, I was looking, it didn't start off being strongly typed as well. I added that because I wanted to learn that about the language. Nostr was pretty new at that time. I think brand new. This was like a week after Nostr was announced. The YouTube channel had maybe 20 subscribers. Welcome to everybody who's new too, by the way. All 1,000 or so of you. At the time of recording this, evergreen, which can be edited down. You know, we can shave off 10 minutes of this needless talking. Whiteboard. Oh yeah, I was gonna draw the API. I was gonna draw all of this before I started the stream, and I got Inkscape ready and everything. Dang. So I've been forcing you all to use your imagination when I could have just drawn this. That's crazy. I think I have another drawing of it already too, but I can redraw it. So we'll just set the first one up because the rest will then follow the same style. So, oh, and this was a brand new concept. I made a Sora video. I'll show the concept video. Good Lord. This is why you don't drink on your desk. Or at very least you put your drink in the designated drink area. I don't usually have a Red Bull, so you notice you make a lot more mistakes when you go outside of your normal routine. So I usually have a cup of coffee and a glass of water in one particular spot, but this can of Red Bull, because I brought it out special, I put it somewhere else, and then my muscle memory swung my hand through where it was, and yeah, thankfully it was empty. No sense of object permanence, just slapped out of sight. Maybe it was this one with the circuit boards? I don't think so. So Hogumadi is the front end. This is when mock BirdSite was kind of conceived. I was doing other stuff with this work queue type situation, like all the way back to the delete tweets service. That was my first browser extension with a work queue, and there I just had a big server of like 40,000 tweet IDs, and about 3 times a minute I would delete the tweets. So, is it this one?
Now sorted by grok, but you can still access your posts chronologically. Just swipe down for the chronological view. Your friends, now sorted by grok. That's bananas. Now sorted by grok, but you can still access...
There was a tweet announcing this service that just announced that, like, it was sorted as though that was some big functionality or something like that, some big feature. Good Lord, how long ago did I make this? Here it is. I was almost there.
The terminal calls the proxy, sending credentials just like the old API.
The proxy opens a tiny browser, drives the real login form, and captures the success token. The terminal calls the proxy, sending credentials just like the old API. The proxy opens a tiny browser, drives the real login form.
How do you not think this is awesome, man? People who are hating on AI,
sending credentials just like the old API. The proxy opens a
tiny
browser,
it took me like 5 minutes.
Drives the real login form, and captures the success token. The terminal calls the proxy, sending credentials just like the old API. The proxy opens a tiny browser, drives the real login form, and captures the success token. The terminal calls the proxy.
So on most of these, like 90%, I put the prompt I used to create it.
The real login form and captures the success
pretty
token.
Loose. And
the terminal calls the proxy,
a long time ago, I described the way like vector embeddings and vector spaces work a little bit. So that's why I can just prompt in this weird style.
The terminal calls the proxy.
It's like word salad,
just like the old API.
But the machine is kind of a narcissist, so you can speak to it like a narcissist. You can give it some word salad.
Sending credentials just like the old API.
It's sort of like
the proxy opens a tiny
thinking version of conveying emotion. You put it at the right location in vector space, and it gives you what you want.
Just like the old API. The proxy opens a tiny browser, drives the real login form,
API proxy server keeps original service API signature so existing clients can work with it by just changing the API endpoint. The login initiates a browser session and drives the UI to log in with the provided credentials in the overridden login flow.
The proxy opens a tiny browser, drives the real login form, and
so that is a gap in my implementation right now. You may be thinking, oh, how does it go from that login page with authorization to actually logging in if you just have one hard-coded credential? Exactly. But it's just a little gap that needs to be coded. I've looked at
the terminal
calls like a WebDriver-based approach to logging into the Twitter homepage, including having like the token generated if you have the seed for the token. But it's just very simple to put the values in and click on a button.
The terminal calls the proxy.
So I need to do that. It's not done. I'm just using it for myself. Again, back to the what is an app thing. We're kind of in the early stages of it's a little bit more than a text file. At this point, it's instead of pasting it into the browser console, maybe we needed a little bit more capability like background tasks, creating tabs that we can't do just from pasting it in. Okay, now we got to load it as a browser extension.
The proxy opens a tiny
as little as possible, though.
The real login form and captures the success token. The terminal calls the proxy, sending credentials just like the old API.
So
the proxy opens a tiny browser, drives the real login form, and captures the success token.
Anyway, so the login initiates a browser session and drives the UI to log in with the provided credentials in the overridden login flow. The successful login then drives the client back to the original app, which uses the login token to drive the original API functionality in the browser session, scraping the page and returning it in the original API format. And then this doesn't show me spacing, but this is probably part of a new paragraph. Trace the data flow through the system from, and it wouldn't matter because of the whole vector space word salad thing. Trace the data flow through the system from original login. So trace it through from the original login. Visualize the browser opening from the terminal app and running through the login flow and returning a token. So does it visualize? It didn't exactly give me what I imagined, but that whole it did right there, and I didn't really notice it until now. But so open the browser from the terminal. Terminal, task, boom, browser opens. So I hadn't even looked at it that closely to notice that. Terminal, browser opens. That's amazing. Visualize the browser opening from... I've got such a big smile on my face. Like, what is that? Is that me being demonically possessed? Uh-oh, I stuttered when I said it. That's crazy. I think it's real cool. But is it a demon saying I think it's real cool? Oh, Lordy. So visualize the browser opening from the terminal app and running through the login and returning a token. So, is it returning a token? Authentication JSON responded. So, kinda. There it says token, token, token. Okay. I say very technical, but make it cute and easy to watch for anyone. Nice simplistic music, quiet, orchestral perhaps. So let's see what he did on the music again.
The proxy opens a tiny browser, drives the real login form, and captures the success token.
Yeah.
The terminal calls the proxy, sending credentials just like the old API. The proxy opens a tiny browser, drives the real login form, and captures the success token.
5 minutes. Learn how to write, seriously. If you don't know, now you know. So maybe I'll use this as the cover image. Boom. Now, can we change it in real time for marketing purposes? So now that we're not software coders anymore, we've got infinite coding resources, we can spend more time learning how to do stuff like market, you know? That's not a bad thing. No, I don't want to exit. I just want to change the thumbnail if I can. Maybe I can go to Studio. Content. Yeah. So hopefully my not narrating everything I'm doing isn't too jarring. If you're listening, hang in there. Doing some marketing purposes. So now that I think this is possible to change the thumbnail. If I had an assistant or something, then I could say, assistant, please change the thumbnail. And there's a way to grant people access to do stuff like that. I haven't done it yet. Boom. Oh, and we can add it to the Hogumadi playlist and live coding, wherever it is, hacking live. And we can search if I want to, but we found it. Save. All right. There we go. So yeah, pardon the detours. All right, so we've got, the auth portion. We can refresh token. So I just had it basically code up a whole. This was another distinct demo that I did. So I mentioned that I was stitching 5 or 6 things together a couple weeks ago. So this was another one. I just had it make me a standalone OAuth server, and then I extracted just the auth functions that interact with the database to just authDB. And I don't have tests for this stuff yet, but basically one way to do it would be, the Oracle it's manually tested, it works as is, but anything you change, you have to test everything that it touches. So it's a little bit grueling in the beginning, but then that gives you, it makes you pretty conservative about changing things. You want to minimize the impact of your change. And then, depending how far out, when you do your impact analysis, you might determine how far out you're going to test, what interfaces you might mock initially, and maybe thinking about the work backlog, what might you strategically knock out next to get some more coverage, blah, blah, blah. So you're not just a code monkey anymore. That job is done. Now you're doing stuff like this. So yeah, actually these interludes are, appropriate when they're on that kind of topic of changing your live stream pictures, modularizing your code. I mean, how I use AI, it's pretty conservative. I just go into a chat with it, have it do stuff for me, and take the results and incorporate them. It's basically a case of if I didn't say anything, you wouldn't know. Great artists steal. Oh my gosh. Is AI stealing? I mean, a lot of people would say yes. Someone might come burn down the village for saying that. But it's made. So, but yeah, again, even very small, simple models can be made. So assuming, let's pretend the worst, ooh, I'm biased. I said the worst. Let's assume the most devastating case. All models are deemed copyright violations. They have to cease. Fine, cool. We know how to make new ones. We have lots of stuff that we can make new models on. That's, just public domain only and blah, blah, blah. We could have even crowd efforts. People who want to get together and make a model, coding style of 2005. There's already some language models that are trained only on stuff from pre 1850, maybe prior. But I think there's an 1850 version, an 1890 version. So you train it only with stuff up to that point of time. So that's pretty wild. And so yeah, whatever you say about LLMs, I know I keep coming out in defense, but even very small models, if you know how to describe, write an init database code for, a basic user system, you don't have to necessarily tell it that it's doing OAuth, but you have to kind of know, okay, what are the elements of OAuth? Maybe you can ask it the elements of OAuth because it can't reason very well, it can't make the connections very well, but it can regurgitate stuff pretty well. Different models might do different stuff well. So you can use very simple models together, if that makes sense. And at some level, I haven't gotten into the whole agents thing and whatnot, but I think that's basically what the agents are doing, is composing, using a model to compose a bunch of specific stuff that, you know, like it's a directory full of markdown files. So you might have like an agent per markdown file. They interact with each other in certain ways that you describe within the files. I just made that up because I haven't done it myself before. And once I set out to do it, yeah, I'll talk about it more. But for now, I'm just doing very simple chat-based help, you know, helper chats. So I extracted AuthDB out of OAuth. So all of these are composed together into MB API server. So we've got the OAuth, the work queue, and the API. So if I wanted to make another one for another service, for example, you know, I've already got this scaffolding. I could sell this right now, you know, but I already just showed it to you. So if you wanted to copy it off the screen, you know, I basically copied it from AI, even though I did some of the work of putting it together. Okay, so you'd be doing the work of translating it from the screen and putting it into your files. So it's not quite free, but you know what I mean? Maybe I make a product that I maintain and keep up to date, and you just like, screw it, I'll pay $10 for this and updates or something, you know? Because if you're really doing paid work for people, you're just gonna, at that point, be buying time as much as you can. So that's who the market is for a lot of this stuff that I'm doing. People who might even be able to do it themselves, you know, be able to describe it to me in pretty good detail, know my working style a little bit, know that I can figure stuff out pretty easy, blah, blah, blah. Exactly like, okay, I'm just another model. Easy. So yeah, I've got some old versions of stuff that I just prefixed with /x if you're wondering about that. And then I just did the V2 stuff in its own blueprint file. That's only the stuff that conforms basically to the API V2 endpoint. So it's loose, it's not perfect, but it's getting started. And we haven't even gone into like the control code to control the scraping and stuff that I mentioned in the very, very beginning. So that was its own portion of the demo. So I'm going to keep that a little bit sauce, you know. You could write your own pretty easily. But basically the pattern is I've got some code to control the scraping. I've got some code to handle the request that then goes ahead and invokes that control. And then I've got the even more specific scraping of the DMs, the tweets, the users, which, you know, there's feedback between handle requests and control scraping. Either of them could be scraping stuff, but for the most part, control scrape will scrape whatever is visible, scroll down because it's lazy loading. It scrolls down by however much. It might have loaded more, it might still be loading, so it just sets like a little timer. Scroll down, scrape whatever is visible, there might be some overlap. You might have caught some console code that looks at two results of scraped tweets, maps across them to get just the IDs, creates a set, and I counted them by hand. There were 17 that I wanted to see in that set, and I merged the two distinct, which was I think 10 and 10 and 11 or whatever it was, 7 and 11, I don't know. But it was not, there was some overlap basically. So I know the set data structure takes away duplicates. Set data structure is what the keys to a dictionary are. So you get free insertion, basically overwriting an old value if there is one. I say free insertion, free distinct values with insertion. And so yeah, I ended up with that set having 17 distinct IDs, so test passed in my mind. So there's more specific stuff to do, like make the code work perfectly in all cases of like showing attached media, videos, several pictures, quote tweets with media, blah, 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 all these edge cases. But we get the general stuff working first. I gave Grok some example HTML to make a parser from. And I where possible, note whatever Grok conversation I used when I made the stuff, but obviously that gets lost, and so I've got to do, find a way to keep inventory of all that. You might just keep it in the README of the file, and if you're already in the pattern of tracking it for like license purposes or whatever, then you might just track it as a dependency as you would any other compliance-based tracking, So I had it write this server with 12-factor app style. It points that out in a comment. This definitely wasn't like a one-shotted thing, This was, all of this together is probably like 10 or 15 different conversations across like the parse tweets, and then I wrote a lot of it just based on stuff. I made fixes to stuff by hand, It's really just like finding code that you would find anywhere else, except it's coming out of this model and it's exactly what you asked for. And if you're good at Googling, you already usually got something pretty close. And you did the same routine of stitching it together. So yeah, if you're doing something new, like making a scraper, like why did I do it this way? I don't need to explain my thought processes, and maybe I shouldn't, because now AI will know the thought process for free, and I'm doing it for a couple likes, My hope would be that people see it and are like, dang, it seems like you know what you're doing, and I have too much stuff to do, and I can pay you to do some stuff for me, But otherwise, I'm just training the AI if nobody's actually, hopefully there's a long tail, like this video, because it's evergreen, can stay online for years. So, about the chat, it might be like, okay, what's up chat, but I'm not gonna say anything, even just names or anything, just because you never know anything. So it's just in keeping the thing evergreen, And so is going meta like that evergreen? Yeah, because the meta, it's still timeless. It still goes with the video whenever it's played back. So evergreen alludes to like trees that stay green all year around in climates that have weather like winter or summer. Thing just stays green all year. So yeah, that's why one might make a scraper. That's a little slice of functionality from a scraper. I didn't give all the sauce away, but I gave probably enough to show you that the sauce probably tastes pretty good. And yeah, basically, you know how to get a hold of me. dailydriverapps.com is where you basically prompt me. And where you can find out what is an app. So customs, with the little pen next to it, you describe it. And yeah, maybe for contact, I'll just make it like one big field instead of saying blah, blah, blah. I could do that right now. I've got a pretty good CMS for this. It's another Python one based on Django, based on Wagtail, which is based on Django, based on CodeRed marketing extensions, which is based on Wagtail, which is based on Django, which is based on Python, not Flask. Django is more of a complete application framework with database and everything, whereas Flask is just a library for handling HTTP requests. Django has its own thing, or maybe it uses one of the main things that's more low level. I don't recall. But yeah, it's got its own like request handling and routing framework and everything that I can read it, but I can't write it. And given an example, I could write it. But yeah, I could just change up the form here and just make it say contact. There we go. So this is sort of how do you sell your scraper extension or whatever you're doing. Polyfill is the general term. You know, you can make a video for it. You can make a website to sell services doing related things. All my other offers are on Gumroad. So 1 hour phone calls, scheduled 24 hours in advance, 5Gs, unlimited per year. I'd say probably like one per day. I don't know, one every single day also. 5Gs? Maybe. Three Gs for 1 day, 5Gs for 2 days. That's all I mean, you know, whether remote or on site, I could go to the Bay Area very easily. Anywhere in NorCal, really. For that price, I can get a hotel. So that's all built in. You just pay, and I figure out the rest. $39 a month, most types of servers, including I'll do a Hogamadi server. Right now, I've got a 12 a month, just early access. I've also got a $225 a month email support. So if I'm supporting an instance, you'll have your own server. That'll just be built into the $225 a month. Will I give you access to the server? We'll have to see. If I can set you up as a regular white label client where, you know, basically if you do something on the server, you're responsible for it. If I'm going to give you access, that'll be the case. If I'm just going to 100% manage it, then we don't have to go through that because you don't have direct access to it, basically. You're still using services that I allow you to use it, but at least I can audit all of that, you know. So, yeah, if you want access to it, we're going to have to set you up as the owner of it, you know. But that can be done. It's just not instant, you know. We'll have to just figure that out. But I've set up white label hosting before. I have not sold any, and so I haven't actually done like the administrative stuff. But yeah, not a problem. Actually, if you want help setting up a white label hosting thing where like you've got some service and you want to sell it like that, I can hook you up, you know. That'd be one of the things where you hire me for a day then. Or you give it to me as async work. Do it, you know, at my own leisure for minimum wage. We might get into, you know, that's a 90-day rate lock-in. I don't have that listed here, but you'd basically just pay me through Venmo or Cash App. I would tell you, you know, honor system, how long it took me, and you would just pay me minimum wage at that for that amount of time or whatever rate after that time. But, you know, it's basically like you say, can you do this within 2 weeks? And I'll be like, yeah, I can get this to you within 2 weeks. And I have a couple hours here and there. I work on it for that rate. You know what I mean? So that's the trade-off, because it's probably something new that I haven't done before, building experience. So doing it for cheap, you know, it's paying me what I get paid to wash dishes. It's a couple more hours on my clock, right? So no pressure, just do it as I can. And then day rate, that's expensive, but I can make you a lot of money, you know? So if you've got me for a whole day, we ain't playing. That's the serious money rate, you know? $30 for an app. I've got a lot of different apps. This was just my very first product that I offered. The Notes app, you know, some fields, updates, free updates for life. I'm going to make this subscription at some point, $30 a year. So you're going to want to get on that if you want to get grandfathered in for life. I'll honor that. You get the source code. It's pretty simple. It's pretty crappy. Man, I did not know LLMs were going to be a thing necessarily when I wrote all of these apps, but I used principles that are extremely friendly to just having an LLM take over development for me, and also training LLMs because of how simple I kept everything. So part of the reason I'm keeping all of this design and stuff private is just because I don't want to train everything on it. You know, I'll train my own private stuff on it, and that'll be awesome. That'll be my model. And then you ask my model to write you some apps. Like, that was not in the original design, but it was basically treating people like trainable, you know, bootstrappable from the ground up assets to the team. And so training an LLM is the exact same thing. And so what I was already doing for humans now just gets infinite labor. How crazy is that? So my business just had infinite labor added to it. Crazy, crazy, crazy. So, like, of course, people still have to know how to code to be able to do what I'm doing. But I've just got, like, I don't have to wait. You know, my one friend who I was gonna be, we were gonna do our first project together, and yeah, unfortunately she passed away. And so that, you never expect that. But now I've got AI basically to train, which, that's terrible. You know, we were friends forever. We met before I even went to community college. And she went to the same community college and then to the same university. She got over math anxiety. We went through all kinds of personal transformations as friends. And she was the first person I knew who was kind of like a alternative person who went to the gym. And so she was like the first person. Yeah, I was one of those people who didn't think the gym was cool in high school. Whereas my kids will definitely think the gym is cool. I just did, I got like pretty overweight. And then I lost all the weight, and that involved going to the gym and getting active and stuff. And then my energy levels were so good. So yeah, slight tangent there. But yeah, you got time to do stuff other than code now. So if you're a little bit fat, go to the gym. If you're a little bit fat, pay it away and buy my app. You're welcome. So yeah, some of my other apps might go out for like $30 a year as well. And those are hosted. So I'll have to find the sweet spot between like, why not just... Oh wait, that's per year, my bad. So if it's, $30 per year for a hosted app, that's pretty fair. Versus $39 per month for your own server. And again, we could set up any server that way where if you don't need access to it, I'll own it. Something like XMPP, I think I want to set you up as owning it, because we'll say if it's open to external stuff or public use, it just gets a little bit too risky, Like, I think I'd still be good. I just don't even want to be involved in the process if it's free range content that I don't have any, that I'm not in full control of. I've got a hardware device. So all of this software is really lightweight because this is a Raspberry Pi based device, which is pretty lightweight. So for example, this could still be running the app. So a misconception you might have about this scraper stuff, it's running in its own browser profile. So I'm browsing from this, see the black everything? Whereas this is a Google Chrome with an extension loaded to run the mock BirdSite stuff. So this is running on a different computer than this potentially. So this is on your desktop or your whatever server. This might be there too, or this might be on a local device because it's got some built-in database caching, so it'll still work offline. So if you're on a road trip and you've got a bunch of cached content, for example, you could be at a rest stop out in the desert, no cell phone service, but you're still scrolling through stuff, you're still looking at media that's cached. You see the use case? That's a whole class of things for van lifers. So I make all this tech stuff, and then I just I need to be talking about it like this more. But historically, I've had to spend so much time coding and just put in, today, I'm putting in really long days, but I'm not just coding, And so my brain isn't quite as fried, but also importantly, it's going on 10 at night. I don't always have space at 10 at night to do these talks. And I'm talking going back like the last 7 or so years that I've been working on this stuff. Like, I just don't always have this space. And so why didn't I just do this 5 years ago? Well, because I just didn't have this space. I was already working on social media apps and stuff 5 years ago, but Hogumadi only came maybe like 3 years ago, and I only worked on it for less than 1 year. Why? Because Twitter API access shut down. And yeah, I just step by step got from scraping data. One of my earlier Gumroad products was copy tweet text. So it was a thing that you pasted into your console, and if it hooked into Control C or whatever. What did it do? Right, so if you had to select some of the text in there, and then if you did like Control C, and okay, so it found the selected text. If the selected text was within a tweet, then it overwrote the functionality. You can cancel an event. Basically, you stop the bubbling and return true or whatever to say that it's been handled. So it's not going to keep bubbling up to higher and higher elements. So you handle it if it's, you know, basically at the timeline level, you handle it. If it's within a tweet, then you override it. And I had a function to parse the tweet into the API format. I might have not even had that step initially. So I just parsed it straight into a JSON structure, you know, named whatever it wants. And then I just had a JavaScript template string with that structure's variables, whatever, author name, profile link, text, blah, blah, blah. And then at some point I got the idea to put it into the API structure, you know, like in this last few months of developing this kind of stuff. And yeah. So it's just been a slow evolution over hundreds of daily dev practice and AI conversations and blah, blah, blah. And then when I get new ideas, sometimes I'm like, yeah, I've already done something similar. I've started spreadsheets to maintain, you know, a full list of all this stuff, but I'm not in the habits of looking them up yet. So a lot of people who are prompting AI are like, yeah, I've done the same thing like 4 times. And on some level, it doesn't really matter. But on another level, just for your own like mental peace, you should be, you know, developing lean and mean tool sets the same way you already should have been, except now you're making a lot more tools because you make them in 5 minutes instead of 2 days. You know, it's like, man, this is taking so much time that it's worth it for me to spend 2 whole days on it. Now you spend 5 minutes, you write down what you want, maybe 15 minutes, whoa. You write it down, you get the response back, you look it over, and it's exactly what you wanted. You don't have to change a thing. You know, as much as 75% of cases are like that for small, simple stuff. You just have to be able to talk to it. You hate the sound of my voice, you hate how much I'm going on right now. It's because like I've done so much reading and so much practice and stuff that I can make just all these connections and tell you why it's valuable. And if you hate it, then, man, you have to do it more yourself. I mean, you might just genuinely not be interested in this stuff too, and that's cool. Like maybe there's 2 people in a room and one person's just like, oh my gosh, this is awful. But yeah. There's millions and millions of channels, and this is for like 25 people in the world. So if you're here, thank you. So yeah, this could definitely be edited down, but that's high level, a slice of mock BirdSite, and a bunch of stuff beyond just coding that would support making it into a product. So yeah, I think I tried to wrap it up like twice. There's a thing called a Minnesota goodbye, which is where you keep saying goodbye, goodbye, you know, for hours. And you go out to your window, your car and you like roll down the window and keep talking for another hour. Goodbye, goodbye. Oh, okay. Oh, blah, 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 blah. And a survival guide. It's published as a draft right now. There's a link in this product description. Boom. It's Creative Commons. It's got a few illustrations. That's one of the big things I need to do is illustration. I could do a live stream and illustrate. If we sell 100 of these, then I will live stream as much as possible until it's done, which I think will be probably like 10 days. 100 sales. And I mean, I think it's all just going to be open source license. So we can probably find out something else to get the 100 people who go ahead and raise me $300+. It's pay what you want, 3+. And there's like 10% fee or something off of that. I don't even know. So yeah, call it like I get like $2 or something. So like raise like $200, 100 sales. Because $200 is like 2 to 3 days in a dish pit at minimum wage. That's actually a lot of money if you didn't know. Because I'll count myself among the people who didn't know because, okay, growing up, sure, it was unfathomable, it was an unfathomable amount of money. Once you say it a couple times, you get the muscles. Unfathomable amount of money. I got a Voodoo 3 graphics card when I was in high school with like $80 in cash, and it was like 90 some bucks or like $120 or something with taxes and everything. Bought it at the GameStop at the Mall of America. And so if I only had like $80 in cash, what was the rest? Change. I went with a ton of change. I bought my first graphics card to play Quake 2. Now I want a graphics card to do LLM research. I want an RTX 3090 24 gig or similar. Really anything 8 gigs or more should be enough to do some rudimentary stuff. My service I mentioned, this was my first work queue or task queue based browser extension, and I just logged in my Twitter and I just had it munch away about 3 per minute. Took like 2 months to do 40,000. Meanwhile, I was doing a bunch of these other concepts in the background, and yeah, by now I've stitched them all together into a couple different things now. Having the time of my life. Just want to sell some stuff now.
The terminal calls the proxy, sending credentials just like the old API. The proxy opens a tiny browser, drives the real login form.
I'm kind of past wanting to be an employee anymore. It seems like it's simple and you make a lot of money and stuff, but man. I think it's just like as we're becoming less of a high trust society, or maybe I just don't have access to high trust opportunities anymore. I don't even want to deal with low trust stuff, because it's like you're literally just putting so much in God's hands where you're just like, man, this is so demonic. I just literally can't do anything. I'm just like in prison. And I just literally can only count on God to get me where I need to be. Oh, but faith without works is dead, right? Yeah, so like I've got to take action as inspired as possible. Oh my gosh, one piece of text is a little bit inaccurate, you know? Like the critic who's just looking for anything they can use against it. Like, oh my gosh, it's a little bit inaccurate. So pretty much what you do is, like, instead of trying to explain it to your designer, take up all their time trying to explain it, work through the concepts, blah, blah, blah. It's like you explain it to AI a few times. It gives you pretty close to what you want. You go to the designer and say, hey, I don't think they'd be insulted at all if you saved them a bunch of time and said, hey, I'm thinking something like this. Here's the exact text I want to use. You can edit this or you can make a new one, you know. It'd be pretty easy to like find one frame where you can take a snapshot of the laptop without anything drawn over it. Like boom, right there. Boom, you've got like a screen. You've got the laptop asset, you know? Maybe you redraw over it with some vectors to make it super sharp, you know? Like this should be common sense to anybody who has just like learned any old craft. Because that's really what AI does, is craft stuff for you as opposed to do the art for you. Like your prompt is sort of like a big poem. It's a little bit artful, you know. API proxy server keeps original service API signature so existing clients can work with it by just changing the API endpoint. And it has some concepts of what this stuff is, you know. So I can talk to it at some level, you know, assuming some understanding. Not all models will have that same domain knowledge. You can figure it out. When I first started doing AI, I would like ask, do you know what an API endpoint is? Do you know what a proxy server is? And once I know that it knows what that is, I don't have to explain it again, you know? All right. So we've been going for just about 2 hours, so seems like a good enough time to shut her down. Sorry about the chat situation. I just want to get on the habit of being on IRC. We're using a third-party server, but it's equally possible that we run our own, you know? So let's bring some new people into IRC. This is like the simplest way onto it possible, you know? You just go to the link in the description. It's going to assume whoever's on it is going to be probably sitting at a desk or something, because you're going to have multiple screens open or multiple, you know, you're going to have some way to be watching and chatting. So it's a little bit of a moat, create a little hurdle for people to jump over. Is it low class to say it like that? You know, to tell people, oh, it's just a moat to jump over, and once I'm in, I can cause havoc as much as I want. So hence, like, all right, everyone can use IRC now. Now people are in here causing havoc. The server admins aren't helpful. I don't know these server admins. They're not helpful. If that's the case, you know, hypothetically, then we can spin up our own server, and then we are the server admin, so we can just ban people. We've got the full IP logs, which says, hey, you should be using a VPN anyway, so I'm using a VPN. Right? So it's annoying, but it's also cultivating aligned practices, because this whole thing is sovereign IT. Like that, sorry to us, you know, if you're new here, that's what we're about. You should get on. You know, there's some products and services. Here's where I just straight up ask for money. Patreon. This is going to be Daily Driver App Club, so there's going to be some rewards. The $100 per month will get stuff like the code to maybe some of my services. So I'm going to drop the tweet deleter code. I made that commitment before mock BirdSite came to be, and I think a lot of the value in the tweet delete service code is already carried into mock BirdSite because it's a more advanced version of the work queue and everything, and it will actually even support the delete endpoint using probably the exact code that I'm using, right? So, you know, I might punt the tweet delete release and just say, you know, I was going to release it, but I released mock BirdSite early access, and Patreons do get free early access on Hogumadi. Chips with a content page and license key and everything. So I just have a 100% off coupon. So you go through the same channel, you get all this. You're a full member, basically, you know, nothing custom. You just go through the checkout process, you put that coupon in, and you get it for free. And then you just get all the same assets and forms and everything. Same communications, everything. And yeah, you know, similarly, if you want me to help you set up a Gumroad store, that's something you could hire me to do. If you want me to do a bunch of things for you on one day, you know, make it add up to $3,000. You know, make it so I'm delivering so much that that's cheap. That's what money is, you know. That's a reasonable gate. It's not like, oh, you think you're so important, you want to charge all that per day? No, I'm going to make you a lot of money. It's not going to be for everybody. But if you are the level that you can have me make you that much money, then let's go. And if not, you know, I'll feed you some nibbles in the Daily Driver App Club. You know, I want people to be sovereign and self-sufficient, but also I want to be sovereign and self-sufficient. So I just want to make what these skills cost me, you know, which is a lot of time, a lot of late nights. So $3,000 for a day, and I'm going to be making you that much money. So fair trade. You should be excited to spend money. I'm happy to pay bills. It feels so good after you pay a bill, doesn't it? Is this crazy talk now? Getting into that crazy talk in the late night. Paying bills feels good? What? Think about it. Doesn't it feel good when you pay? You might have a couple $100 left, but all your bills are paid. Oh yeah, when you put it like that, yeah. I'm not going to walk back paying them feels good either. Because while you're paying it, you should be thinking through what it's going to feel like already, right? You're paying it to manifest your reality of having all your bills paid. Now you're a person who's got all your bills paid, and you're manifesting that. You're throwing that money, you're getting that result. Motivation to make more money faster, right? Pressure makes diamonds. Pain makes you grow. You know, there's biblical suffering periods of like Joseph in jail, Job being tested. You know, you can get in, low IQ, argue about this and that about the testing in this context. It's agreed upon that there's reasons for it by a lot of people, maybe not everybody. But he got through it and he got rewarded. Oh yeah, but all those people died and stuff. The story wasn't about them. Dark as that may be. I'm not a huge expert. I've only read it. I've read it multiple times, but not that many. Okay. But yeah, sometimes you have to go through a bunch of stuff to get to where you're going. This logo, as well as the iSpooge YouTube logo, were among the first prompts that I ever did through image gen. I did image gen before text or videos. So I made a couple logos for stuff. Alright, cool. Yeah, it's slop, but I feel like I get pretty good results out of AI for the most part. iSpooge daily. I still have the original prompt for that somewhere. But yeah. I can definitely help you set a lot of this stuff up. Or if you've already got it set up and you need development help, that's what I'm really good at. But all this stuff I've done a lot of it, so I can figure it out pretty good. So this isn't really even product management, so it's like basic marketing, which could be a function of PM, you know. Basic marketing, product management. Yeah, do we keep it under 2 hours or do we go over? All right. So, oh, is it frozen? No, we went over. All right. So, thanks for joining. Have a good one. Cheers.